Empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men, shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives. Shatter the stereotypes. Shatter the stereotypes. Power Black men to live extraordinary lives.
Welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where the intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. This show is based on the simple idea that every Black man is capable of creating inner peace, dynamic health, great relationships, and financial abundance. Therefore, we provide insights and strategies to educate, motivate, and inspire Black men to reach their full potential and create the life of their dreams. So if you're ready for some high-octane motivation and inspiration that supports and empowers you to live the life you were born to live, get ready to shatter the stereotypes so you can build a life that lights you up and positively impacts the world. So now, let's shatter the stereotypes with your host, Coach Michael Taylor.
Hello and welcome to Shatter the Stereotypes, where my intention is to empower Black men to live extraordinary lives. You see, there's never been a shortage of Black male role models. There's only been a lack of exposure of those role models in mainstream media. So my intention is to showcase and highlight Black men who are doing remarkable things in the world. As an optimist, I'm always inspired when I meet Black men who are working to provide solutions to some of the challenges Black men face. One such solution is personal coaching. And as a certified life coach, I know the power of coaching men to help them transform their lives. I was recently introduced to Joshua Lee, who is a personal development coach and the creator of the Game Plan for Better Living, which definitely sounds like a great plan. So I wanted to bring him on the show so he could share some tips on creating a game plan to help you build an extraordinary life. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Joshua Lee. Hello, Joshua. How are you?
Hey, Michael, what's happening?
It's all good, man. So before we jump into your work and your story, let's start off with a few icebreakers. So first of all, tell us where you're from and tell us a little bit about growing up during your teenage years. What was that like?
Teenage years. Oh, my goodness. First of all, I hail from one of the greatest cities in America, Baltimore, Maryland, West Baltimore. And when I say that, I'll pause a minute and allow that to sort of gravitate throughout the space, right, where others and they're ready to sort of push back and say, no, Baltimore this and Baltimore's that. Have you heard about The Wire, right? And so I say, yeah, all that's true for right now. And I'm sticking a stake in the ground to say this is one of the greatest cities in America. Somebody has to stand for what the possibilities are in the future, right? So that's where I'm standing, and that's my declaration, right? And my teenage years, boy, I'm the youngest of six, 4 older brothers and 1 older sister, and I learned a lot of things as most baby siblings do from older siblings, right? I learned a lot of great things, how to tie my shoes and, how to clean up after myself, right? And I also learned some not so good things, right? Related to drugs and alcohol and, lying and cheating and not being an honest person. So when I got to junior high school, as it was called back then, I had all the trappings of, a young person who, even though I had older brothers, at some point in my life, I felt like they all became unavailable to me emotionally, right? So I was out there sort of trying to find my way on my own or with my homeboy Eric at the time and the guys from around the way. And so it was challenging. I was drinking and drugging at 13, 14 years old, right? And I recall one teacher saying, "You are a big fat waste."
Ooh, wow.
He said that, and he was a white teacher, and of course, all the students laughed. But he came to me afterwards. He was totally frustrated. He apologized and said, "Hey, man, you have all this potential, and you wasting it away."
Mm.
Right? And there was a black male assistant principal who said that whenever he goes out and knows that he's going to be, have some downtime, he always takes something to read with him. And we just laughed at this guy. We just thought, as a 14-year-old, that was one of the silliest things you could do. But now, and as I've gotten older, I learned, wow, how powerful that is, right? And thank God I grew. I'm 6'3". Right now, I'm like two biscuits away from 300 pounds, but I grew big enough and tall enough to get into sports. And so therefore I left the drinking and drugging crowd. And I'm so glad I did. There were weapons around me, and I even carried a fake gun, which was, now I know, totally, that was more dangerous, right? But yeah, that was sort of a snapshot. I was brilliant, I was smart, creative, and I was creatively a knucklehead, right? You're on mute, Michael.
You mentioned the teacher that wanted to read some books and how that kind of, as a 14-year-old, you're not interested. With that thought in mind, though, name a book that has impacted your life.
Um, Other than my own that I just finished writing,
That's
yes, the Game Plan for Better Living Coaching is what I just completed a couple months ago. I would say a very foundational book for me was Power versus Force.
ooh, I love that book.
Yeah. That really talks about consciousness. And I have some spiritual texts as well that really, really just set me apart.
Now, do you like movies?
I do.
Name one of your favorite movies.
Hustle and Flow.
Ooh, okay. I
It
hear.
is it's DJ,
Yeah,
older guy, but never gave up on his dreams.
yeah. What an amazing acting job too, man. That guy was unreal. He was so believable in that role.
Yeah.
All right, so let's do some sentence completions, okay? I really love to.
Create something out of nothing.
Mm. My superpower is.
Spontaneity, flowing with the go.
I am proud of.
I am proud of my 5 daughters who all have J names, and I'm proud of my grandchildren who, by the way, all have J names. Especially my grandson, who's the oldest, who's a sophomore in college, really coming of age and growing into himself very, very powerfully.
Nice. Life is.
Life is wonderful. Life is challenging, and I like how Barack Obama said it. Um, Life is full of pain, which is inevitable, but suffering is optional.
Mm. And last but not least, the future is.
Wide open.
Wide open.
It's a creation. The
Love.
future is about possibility.
Now, I wrote a book called The Cure for Loneliness, a Black man's guide to joy, passion, and purpose. And in the book, I talked about the unique challenges that we as Black men face while being in environments where we're the only person of color. And I'm certain you've probably had that experience. So I'm curious how you navigate through that.
Well, I have been in many rooms by myself as a Black person, as a Black male. I have a master's in social work. So, uh, social work is a field that's dominated by women. So much so that in our graduate school, there was 3 floors, and one men's restroom was up on the 3rd floor. So that meant that they turned typically the male female on each level into all female, and one upstairs for men. And I was in education as a school social worker. So again, a lot of women. And first of all, really just being aware of the perceived power dynamics, right? As a man in this society, what influence and what power really, and that's why the book Power versus Force really helped me to sort of navigate that world. Very much respect the authority of women, and just being myself, being someone who, now I'm a big dude, and just on sight, people sort of have their notions about big Black men, right? And I am a gentle giant until I'm not, until you poke the bear, right? And so that's how I carry myself. I know I've been sort of, I have this special gift and talent of being with people, being with them at their lowest, and also being with them at their highest. So these big, moments of emotionality that I've sort of been being prepared for, right? And that's the work that I do.
So, as a man who happens to be Black, are you optimistic or pessimistic about the future in general?
I'm optimistic, very optimistic, because, I have a say in how it goes. I have a say in how I choose to see any situation that I'm in. Again, Barack Obama said pain is inevitable. So if you're living, breathing, you get a cut and you bleed red, right? That pain is coming. There's suffering in humanity, for sure, but how one chooses to interpret the events of such things that happen, then you have a say in what goes. So I'm very optimistic, and that's what I try to support others to go to that space.
Yeah, and I like to think of myself as an irrepressible optimist with a passion for the impossible. That's just the lens through which I see the world, a world filled with infinite possibilities for those of us who are willing to put forth the effort. Now I'd like to give you an opportunity to introduce Joshua Lee to the Shatter the Stereotypes audience. So in your own words, introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
Yeah, so I am the youngest of 6 children of David Lee Sr. and Thelma Lee, who are both deceased at this time. And I've been fully prepared to take on the path that's been chosen for me. I have a sort of one would say, an impossible promise to the world, to the universe, which is to help humanity win. To help humanity win. And so my life experiences have pushed me in that direction. Early on, I was kicking and screaming because people would, interact with me and ask me if I was a pastor. And I'd go, oh, heck no, I'm not. I go to the grocery store and the woman would, you're a pastor, right? And now I know what they were sort of pointing to. They were pointing to my sort of calm demeanor, right? Reassuring people around me, the space is safe, right? Oftentimes, social workers or people in helping profession go into those professions because they want to see suffering end. And I was one of those. In my family of origin, there was, drugs and alcohol usage, right? And abuse, violence, domestic violence, mental illness. Much of that was undiagnosed and even certainly untreated, right? So I wanted to learn about those things. So that's why I went to social work school, to support my family and others. And so my training involves being a social worker. I say at this point, I'm a reformed social worker, so I no longer do social work, but I bring that into the coaching lane. And part of my training there is as a psychodramatist, big word, which means that I'm able to help people to tell the subjective truth of their lives in action. And psychodrama meets at the intersection of psychology and the stage, right? So I help at the individual level, and I also help at the collective communal level as well. And so people in this country don't hear a lot about psychodrama because it's usually reserved for the clinical space. It actually has its roots in community over 100 years ago, and I have been on that other end of taking it back into community. And one of the projects that I started back in 2006 was to go into barbershops, right? Just so happened to be there getting my hair cut, and I had a argument with one of my brothers who said, Daddy had died, right? He was dead at this point, and his birthday was coming up. Let's celebrate him. And my brother goes, "Oh, hell no, don't you know that he was X, Y, and Z?" And I was very perplexed, and then I had to go to the barbershop for my appointment. I remember just sort of falling asleep, and this sort of vivid image came to me that this is one of our community institutions. Why not bring these healing conversations to these communities, to these institutions? And I launched a project that had mental health professionals such as myself going into barbershops, as well as substance abuse professionals. And we've had lay persons, people who are part of the church, but even pastors and so forth, who wanted to see some social change in our social institution called the barbershop. So before there was, LeBron James in the barber shop, I was doing this back in 2006. And then, there was sort of we stopped going in for a minute, and then the riots, some would say, but I call them an uprising in Baltimore, happened in 2015. And we were able to go back and talk about that incident and, current events during that time. And so, Michael, here's what I believe. I believe we as a people have our solutions to our own problems, right? And if we can bring ourselves together into a space and just talk about what there is to talk about, right? We talk about everything else from A to Z, but let's talk about healing. Let's talk about things that uplift our community, and not just talk about it, but be about it as well.
And so I hear you. I agree 100%. I do believe we do have the solutions to all of our problems. It's just a matter of collectively coming together to figure out how to resolve them. And once again, I think coaching is a great way to do that, to provide, especially men of color, with some opportunities for growth and transformation, which is what we're going to be talking about today. So what I've come to know is that there are really only two things that will cause a man to want to change. One is pain, and the other is what I call divine discontent, which is just an inner feeling, an inner knowing that something's just off. So in your case, as a social worker, but before your social work, I'm sure you've done some work, some inner work. You talked about consciousness, so I know you've done some work. So I'm curious, what was it that propelled you to begin your journey of transformation? Was it pain, or was it that divine discontent?
I think it was pain and then divine discontent.
Mm.
So, people want to be relieved from their pain, their immediate pain, right? And then, the rest of, then we have your attention, so to speak, right? And so for me, it was the pain of being in a family that, my dad had a third grade education, but was able to teach himself so many trades, and he amassed um, a bus service, right, in the city of Baltimore that was pretty huge, as I understand, right? So that's one part of him. The other part of him was violent as hell, right? Uh, but he was known in the community as, very respected gentleman who lived in West Baltimore. And so how do you reconcile these two parts that we both saw? So he taught me and taught us how to fend for ourselves, how to provide for our families, how to protect ourselves, and so forth. And at the same time, we also got these incidents and memories and reflections of violence in our household, right? And so what helped me to change was to see that and know that I wanted to be a part of the solution and not a part of the problem. So my pathway took me the educational route, right? To one, my oldest brother has a chronic mental illness. So I wanted to learn about that stuff, right? Because I felt like he intentionally made mama upset. And what I know now and knew when I got to graduate school was that that was a part of his illness, right? And so not to, take the responsibility from him, but simply have enough information to respond in kind, right? So, and then once I got sort of comfortable with the immediate pain, and then there's this piece about spirituality, right? There's this piece about, going to the church in that community. Daddy was part of the church, right? He made us go. And there was a point in my life where I was like, this is BS. Again, how do you reconcile these two parts of a central male figure in your life? And so I went on my journey throughout college, looking for, the right religion. And for me, where I've landed was in a new thought about life, a new thought about who I am in the context of my life's journey, and indeed, what is my life's journey, right? So and I found that in Baltimore, what a blessing that was. And somebody said, you know, go over there. The church is over there, right? Don't know the name of it, but if you keep going, sort of like the hero's journey kind of thing. We have this so-called problems at home, and it stirs us up to want to move out of that space. So we go on this journey, and you have guides along the way, and they guide you. They don't necessarily give you answers, right? But they point in some ways. And so when I finally found this place, it was a moment of upset inside my first marriage. And when I arrived there, I grew up when church at a point when church let out at 11, right? Yes. So no, started at 11. Yeah, but anyway, I got to this church and they were letting out. Yeah, they were letting out at 11. I was like, oh my goodness, I finally found it, and I felt like I needed it, but they were on their way out. And so 20 plus years later, I'm still there and so glad that I found that place.
Yeah. Again, myself also very involved with the New Thought teachings. And as a former atheist, I understand how we have to find our own place. And too many times, religion is kind of tossed upon us and we don't question it, we just accept it. But sometimes we have to go on our own journey to find our own truth, and that's a really interesting and important journey we all must take. Now, I want to jump back to coaching because you say you're a social worker, and as a social worker, in some ways, I think there's like coaching involved. But how did you, or what made you decide, in addition to being a social worker, that you wanted to be a coach?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I'm no longer a social worker. I was told here again, somebody guided me to a personal and professional growth and development organization that I spent 12 years inside of. So we did coaching on a daily basis. And I'll just say the name Landmark Education, Landmark Worldwide, right? And so we were doing coaching before coaching was even, a big thing in the world. And I wish they had some accredited sort of, body that would allow us to, convert some of those hours into credits. Well, anyway, but I still have the practical experience. So I really loved when I was a social worker, even though I worked with homeless men and women, I couldn't, on a regular basis, I really felt my heart just sinking, right? Because of, hey, we got housing for you. Do you want to come off this is an opportunity to come off the streets. No, we want to stay in the streets. We want to stay drinking and drugging, right? And it's like, all right, how much longer do I want to deal with this, right? So at Landmark, I found that I could interact with a more progressive professional adults, right? Um, and so I really love that space. It's very creative. It's all about possibility. It's, and even though there are challenges there, right? In terms of it's a mindset shift that people have to really come and be open to what's possible as opposed to the pain and suffering that's available. I mean, that's there with them on a daily basis, right? Also, when I step back a bit, say I was also a social worker to um, adjudicated boys, teenagers, and young men in the DSS system, the social services system. So I would go to their group homes and I would have to bring stuff with me to interact and engage them. They won't sit down and talk to you for 45, 60 minutes across a table. It has to be very interactive, has to be, so I'm creating games on the fly oftentimes, right? So I'm bringing a basketball, I'm bringing a football, bringing a chessboard, checkerboard. So something to be that intermediary between us that helps the conversation and really allow them to be willing to talk about, right? So I have this active part of me that really blends well with psychodrama, right? Psychodrama is clinically based, but again, it has its roots in community. And so my love for bringing some interactive things to conversations and content with the technical skills and training of psychodrama allowed me to create, my coaching model, right? Which is the game plan for better living. And indeed, I do that to help people bridge the gap between the verbal and the nonverbal, right? Adults having fun, even while they tell some pain that comes with their story. So that was sort of the bridge from social work to coaching.
I'm glad you brought that up because I'm a graduate of Landmark also.
Awesome.
And interestingly enough, I know that when I did the Landmark Forum, I was the only Black person in the whole group. And this was been back in the 90s at Landmark Forum. And again, I became obsessed with personal transformation. Landmark Forum was one of many workshops that I've done that have allowed me to connect with who I truly am, my authentic self, some people might call. Yeah. And I noticed that when I was attempting to get friends and family to join something like a landmark forum, or one of my favorites was called LifeSpring, which the
Mm,
founders of Landmark, or one of the Landmark is actually an offshoot of the LifeSpring training. So they're very similar.
mhm.
But I had a real difficult time getting Black folk to invest in personal development. And so one of the things I decided to do is I wrote a book back in 1994, specifically for Black men, called Brothers, Are You Listening? A Success Guide
Mm,
for the 90s. And in
mm,
the book, I basically shared some of the lessons that I learned through these trainings without even mentioning the trainings. I just said, look, man, it's up to us to invest in our personal growth and development. Because when I was doing the landmark and all these other things, I'd go to the bookstore and I look in, personal development, and I saw very few Black people talking about personal development.
yeah.
They send you to the African American section and it's African American studies and history and stuff like this. But I say, well, why aren't we investing in our own potential? Why aren't
Mhm,
we having these
mhm.
Tony Robbins conversations and doing these workshops? And so I said, you know what? All right, I'm going to launch my own. And so that's was how this movement started. I first wrote the book, Brothers, Are You Listening? To engage Black men in personal development. And then I
Mhm.
wrote a book called Black Men Rock, which is, again, a personal development book. And then I launched the Shatter the Stereotypes movement, which is based on a book that I wrote called Shattering Black Male Stereotypes. So I've created this movement to
Mhm.
empower Black men. Because as you mentioned at the beginning, I believe we have the solutions to all of our problems. and, so,
Mhm.
and so what I'm attempting to do is create some of those solutions. And that's why we're having this conversation.
Mhm.
Again, for those of you who are watching, if you're not familiar with the Landmark Forum, it's a program or a workshop that simply allows you to really look at and challenge your perceptions and beliefs and assumptions about the world around you.
That's
And
right.
it challenges you to make a decision whether or not you want to change what's going on in here so that your outer world changes. So just real quickly, Joshua, if you would, just if you can kind of just touch bases on your experience with Landmark, if you'd be willing to share that, because it ties into what coaching is all about. It's about transformation. So
Right.
can you share maybe some insight that you got from doing the training?
Yeah. As I said, I spent 12 years in that system, right? So first, everybody comes through the Landmark Forum, and I realized that over the course of that weekend that an almost 10-year-old Joshua made a decision about life, made a decision about myself, in my family, in my community, and essentially about life, particularly around my birthday, right? Um, I had of course, being the youngest, I felt like I could get anything I ever wanted, right? So I'm in one of our first floor rooms at our home, our family home that I grew up in, and I'm writing everything I wanted out of the J.C. Penney catalog, right? I'm talking from, Baltimore had the coats back then. I wanted everything Baltimore coats, bed sheets, lamps. I wanted everything Baltimore coats, right? Went from A to Z, went into the Husky section. I wanted the dress fine, you know what I mean? And so front of the page, back of the page, had everything written, the totals, the amounts, and then the totals. And then I hear my mother coming in the door, and I excitedly run to her, and I said, "Ma, here's the stuff, all the things I want for my birthday," right? So she takes it, she looks at it front and back, and she rips it up and says, "No, you can't have it." And in that moment, a 9-year-old, almost 10-year-old sentenced himself to, there's that suffering piece, right? So every year around my birthday, which is in November, I start this emotional downslide, sort of a mudslide into this dark space, right? And in the Landmark Forum, I learned that that 9-year-old did that, right? And had forgotten that I made that decision. And so the Landmark Forum has you to sort of reflect. It's not therapy, but it has you to reflect on these decisions you've made throughout your life and how they show up in, your everyday life, even as an adult. And when saw that I had sentenced myself to, all this frustration and angst around my birthday. I hated my birthday. And for 30 years, that's what it was like. Now, my mother did get my girlfriend at the time for my 16th birthday. They got me. Right? And so they surprised me. But then shortly thereafter, I went back because I couldn't trust others to make me happy. Right? And so Sunday night of the Landmark Forum, I'm free and liberated, man. I go, oh my goodness. Yes, I did make that decision. And that was the seminal moment, right? And so, my birthday is the 13th of November, and the holidays are shortly follow, right? So I hated the holidays. And, what's all this stuff that we should be excited about Thanksgiving, right? So I would either go late to my mother's house or not at all, right? So 2005 Thanksgiving, I go early. So early, she's still cooking. We still had keys to the house. So I let myself in and go to the kitchen, approach the kitchen. She turns around and almost drops the freaking pot she was working on. I said, what are you doing here? Like, are you okay? What's happening with you? All right. And I said, no, Mom, no. Everything's cool. I just, I realized something and I want to share with you. And I told her that story. Of course, the other person almost never remembers that, like the person that, who was done to. And she was like, well, okay. She still didn't recall that. I'm sorry, that's not true. She didn't necessarily recall that incident, but she knew something shifted, right, within me. Something shifted for 30 years. And then said, Mom, no, I'm good now. I love you, appreciate everything you've done, for me, but I'm good now, right? And so much so that, I still believe that I don't buy into the Christmas commercial, aspects of Christmas. I really appreciate Kwanzaa and what that really stands for. Besides, that really just allows me to be more creative with the gifts I give. Sometimes they don't appreciate, but I love the sort of the conceptual framework of Kwanzaa, right? Yeah, so I think I even forgot your question, but that's
Yeah,
fine.
no, we're talking about landmark farming and the impact that it has on us. And again, I think this is really important because in my first book, Brothers, Are You Listening? The very first chapter was called the That's What White People Do mentality.
Mm.
And in that chapter, I challenged Black men to examine whether or not they were unwilling to do certain things because they thought that's what white people do. And I made a list of a lot of things that you hear Black people say, like Black people don't go to therapy, Black people don't skydive, all these different things. But the point was, and you really nailed it because I think this is something we have to look at, especially as men. There's a wonderful book out there called True Purpose. And the guy wrote the book, and in essence, the book is about finding your authentic purpose, why you were put on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
He says in the book, each of us has what he calls a sacred wound.
Mm-hmm.
And what happens is something happens, and it's usually before the age of 10. Something happens, and we make a decision that there's something wrong with us, or we're not lovable, or we're not worthy. And it is in that moment that we then begin creating all these different defense mechanisms to try to feel worthy because something happened that caused us to believe that we weren't worthy. And it's a really powerful book, but kind of what you were saying about the story when you were 9 years old. I had a similar experience. My sacred wound happened to me when I was 6 years old. Mm. When I was 6 years old, my mom was a single mom with 6 kids. And she took me to live with my dad, who I really didn't know because he had left when I was really young. He had left when I was like maybe 2 or 3. Mm. So anyway, she takes me to live with her because my oldest sister had became ill and she just couldn't afford to take care of us all at the same time. So she takes me to live with my dad. Well, as a 6-year-old, what I processed was people who love you leave you. Mm. And that belief for years drove a negative behavior in which, in order to try to get people to love me, I became this people-pleasing nice guy.
Mm-hmm.
And so that sacred rule set in motion all these defense mechanisms of trying to be nice, trying to be smart, all to try to get love.
Yeah.
And so this process that we're talking about right now is about transformation, transforming those limiting beliefs about who we are
Mm-hmm.
to who we truly are. And that's, in summary, that's what coaching is about. It's about, my definition of transformation is transforming yourself from who you thought you were to who you were born to be.
Mm-hmm.
See, because I believe we're all born with a divine purpose. I believe we all have a divine spark of divinity within us, and it is our responsibility to figure out what that is. That's our work. That's what we have to do.
Yeah.
And so in this conversation, we're talking about coaching and transformation, but ultimately it boils down to us, especially as men of color, to be willing to look at the stories and the beliefs we've created that is driving our lives and we're not even conscious of it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, coaching is a very personal experience. There's lots of different ways to be coached, doing a landmark forum, hiring an individual life coach. There's an infinite amount of ways for us to be transformed. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So as a certified life coach myself, I've worked with men around the globe talking about transforming their minds, right? So I want to talk about your game plan program that you've created and how that applies to what we're talking about, how coaching is. So tell us a little about, first of all, program and how it works.
Yeah, great, thank you. I've always been someone to, we talked earlier about being the only one, right? The only Black person. I've always been someone to be that one. Yeah, Lord, I'm the, choose me. I'll go, and then I'll get it and bring it back, right? And that's what I've done ever since the Landmark Forum. I'm like, if my life changed, right? And it actually took me 5 years to actually, from the first introduction to the Landmark Forum, to actually be sitting in a weekend of the Landmark Forum. It took me 5 years. And I just recall, like, oh my goodness, if I had had this 5 years ago, some of that suffering could have ended, right? So I always wanted to have other people have this experience. And so if they were not going to come to the Landmark Forum, then daggone it, I was going to bring the Landmark Forum to them, my version of it, right? And what my way of being with and dealing with and interacting with our people, right? And so one of the landmark courses was the team management and leadership program. And it was for sort of entrepreneurs and, business people, so forth and so on. And we brought sort of what we call game technology to it, right? And hence the name, the game plan, right, for better living is what I added later. And so I also learned very early on that the more playful, the more sort of light-heartedly you can interact with people, the more open and willing they are, right? So what better vehicle than sort of a game model, but where you are moving about, where you're not just sitting and you're the talking head up front and people are sitting passively, either they get it or they don't get it, right? The body doesn't lie, right? And so when they're up and moving about, and I'll see them start to move their hands as they start to tell their narrative, I'll go, what if your hands could talk right now? What would they be saying? And they go, and they say what it is, and that drops them down to a deeper level, right? So the subtext of the game plan for better living performance coaching is all in, ALLIN, which is an acronym for assess, leverage. So assess the situation, right? What game are you actually playing right now? I'll tell you a quick story about what the context for game, right? Leverage your strengths and resources, because we all have them. Locate where you are in this game and begin to turn the corner with some integration, integrating the old way of thinking with your strengths and creating something new. That's the N in all in, right? And when I worked with homeless men, guys from, just coming out of jail or whatever, and I say, hey, you all are playing a game. And they looked at me like, and they've taken themselves off the streets. They've come, they say, hey, I'm tired of playing that. They didn't use these words, but essentially that's what they did. I'm tired of playing that game. I want to play a new game. And so when I said game, this guy raised his hand and said, no, Mr. Joshua, I ain't playing no games no more. That's what got me here. Right. And I go, no. So here's the context for game in this program, this process. It is a core set of beliefs that has a corresponding set of thoughts, feelings, and actions that govern your behavior just as shortly as you're playing basketball or football. These are the games, the rules of life, the rules of living, right? So, and then I'll further, explain, if you were a thief, if you believed it was okay, and that was a core belief of yours, what would you be doing and what would you not be doing, right? So if I believe in that thing, I'd be taking things that didn't belong to me. These are my actions, right? An ant on a fly on the wall could see that I'm doing these things. I'm violating other people's personal properties. I am lying, I'm stealing, right? And what would you not be doing? Honoring others, keeping my hands, that kind of thing. So they really got it. And I tested it out with, various populations, even young people. That's actually where I got started with this concept called the game plan. And, with the young people, I was a social worker in an alternative school, and they get kicked out of their regular schools. They come to this temporary schooling situation. All the stakeholders are around the table, all their adults in their lives, the parents, grandparents, probation officers, substance abuse professionals, and so forth. And these young people are so crafty, ingenious, and very skilled at knowing what they need to say to get those folks off their backs, right? And so they would say, I want to get back to my regular school as soon as possible. So I'm going to be going to school, getting there on time. I'm going to, not get in trouble, get my grades up. They knew to say that. And then the adults go, oh, okay, I think he's turned a new leaf, right? And so as soon as they go and the honeymoon's over, those old behaviors started to come back. And then I started to ask the question, well, what game are you really playing? Right? What game? And then they said, what are you talking about, Mr. Joshua? And I just hold up the piece of paper that has their grades, their attendance record, their conduct record. And they couldn't argue with that. They couldn't argue with the facts, right? And so the game plan is about looking at what game it's a framework for living, right? I don't give solutions, right? It's a discovery process. It's an uncovering process, right? It is oh my goodness, all I got to do is look at the results, right? So no judgment here, but let's look at the results. The results are my grandmother's given up on me, right? Or I have ruined all these major relationships I have with my family. I've ruined these relationships based on my behavior, the things I've done and continue to do. Those are the facts, right? And so let's call it a game, right? So we can get some framework around this thing. And then who's the major player? Who's the main player in this game? I am. Oh my goodness. So therefore, I have control because I created that game, right? Let's do the all-in process. Let's assess. Let's leverage your strengths, because I would tell the homeless men, bro, I would say, dudes, if you all got to me and you've been out there for 20, 30 years, you got some strengths and skills. right? Then they go, ah, yeah, they have survival skills, right? Doing the things that are needed to get them to the next day. And let's locate where you are in this game. Yeah, well, I am, just come out of prison and unemployed, right? Let's look at those things and let's start to bring to merge your strengths and the challenges, and let's look for something to come out on the other side, which is an integrative, um, future-based process that creates something new, right? And so I started really writing down, codifying this process, looking at it, and then we can do this in action as well, right? Whenever there's a space, because again, the body doesn't lie, and we can move people through the spaces of the basics of the game plan and have them discover something new on the other side, right? So the game plan is a process. It is a life space for people to discover and uncover the games that's been heretofore hidden from them. Just like me as a 9-year-old made that decision and forgot that I hated trusting, having to rely on people to make me happy around my birthday, and that lasted for 30 years. So during the Landmark Forum, it was uncovered for me, like OMG, right? And so if I had the power to create that game, don't like the results, right? Now let's look at the opponents of that game. And then I kept getting, who are the opponents? And most of the people would say, I am my worst opponent. Yeah, what does that mean? Right? What is that? Let's look at that. Let's pull a string on that. Well, I procrastinate. I have these voices in my head that, that internal critic, I'll start something and I won't finish it, right? I will be excited about something, see another shiny penny over there, and then jump to that, right? So, all right, cool. Let's look at those. Now we have a framework to identify these things in your life, and when you can touch, move, and manage it. And so the psychodrama piece of this is being able to concretize or externalize that internal world in now a physical form. So for example, I have a pen, this is procrastination. We can do it tabletop, we can do it on the floor, we're standing and moving around on the floor. But now I can see that, oh my goodness, this is procrastination. What color is it? And then we can bring our sense of some sensory information and data to it. Well, my procrastination looks like gray. It's gray, right? And so we get to contextualize it a little better. And oh, by the way, it's not a regular size pen. It's a big old fat marker. That's how the weight of it feels on me, right? And so when we can do that, and now we can reshape it to something new, we can integrate it, and then there's a new, and that job was to protect me from, the job of procrastination is really the job of protecting me from failure, right? A lot of people, a lot of men are not a fear of failure, actually, it's a fear of success. And so procrastination comes along and says, I'm going to protect you from that, right? And so now let's give it a new job title. Well, procrastination can now become just a pause, right? Now I know its function, and now I know its value in my life. It's a pause for me to check in and see that, am I really just taking a break, or I'm just afraid to cross that finish line and what's on that other side, right? So that is the game plan in a nutshell. And I can do it at the individual level. It can be done at the collective level as well.
Yeah, so give us an idea of logistics of it. So for example, on an individual level, somebody's watching this and they go, man, I really want to learn from this guy, this whole game plan thing. So where do they start if they want to play that game and learn your process?
We start with the foundational piece called the four corners. I call them the four corners of success, of support rather, which includes, just imagine there's a, shape of a, say, basketball court, four corners, right? Rectangle, square, whatever. You have fans, coaches, referees, and teammates, right? I say every game has those, at least those four elements, right? And then we take it, it's not, remember, it's a metaphor,
Right.
right? We're not talking sports, but people can identify with these basic elements. Everybody knows fans, right? You ask the young people, they have their fan base is broken down to my bestie, associates, and them over there, right? So what they're really talking about are people in their inner circle, people who are sort of 50-50, right? They are fans when they're fair weather fans, or I don't like them. They are on the opposite side of the field, right? But these four corners represent roles people play in your life. So my wife is my biggest fan, right? And we start to identify these people, even with just the identification of these people, writing their names down on a piece of paper. Who are my fans? All right, fans support you and observe you, right? And you can have, this thing is deep, man. You can have, fans on the, in your inner circle that I say at the 50-yard line of your life, right? And you can have people in the nosebleed section of your life, right? Still observing you and still have something to say about how you play in the game, right? And the impact on them based on how the results you're getting, right? And then you have coaches over here who lead and guide you, right? The coaches are the people who play the roles of leading and guiding. They give you life plays. Boy, don't, I was about to say, don't eat yellow snow. That's sort of a, but it's essentially, if you see something, if you know it's not good for you, stay away from it, right? Those are plays of life. For young people, they'll say, yeah, my grandmother is boy, I just want you to finish school. Just do what you got to do to finish school. Don't disrespect your mother, right? Those are the people who play the roles in your life. And then you have the referees who are your accountability holders, hold you accountable. Like a lot of people don't want to be held accountable, but even my 7-year-old grandchildren know that if there's no referee in the game, what kind of chaos ensues, right? So the referee is an accountability holder. And I work with this church, real quick story, where they brought me in for ministry leadership development, right? There was some things happening in the church that sort of pointed to the first lady. The first lady took the role of the referee in the church's environment, right? She was the one to say, sister, you know better than that. Well, brother, don't you know God don't like ugly or something like that, right? And so when I got in and started to get a sense and take them through this framework, they now have a common language, right? Furthermore, we had to recontextualize, right, the role of the referee. What if First Lady Sister so-and-so is not present to just call what she sees, right? Blow the whistle, throw the flag, but the recontextualization piece of it is, are you, Madam Referee, leaving them with the ickiness of being held accountable, or you're leaving them with the love of Jesus? So we just had to do a 2 millimeter shift to get her to see that she was leaving them, burned, like a hot iron, right? And you sinful so-and-so, right? But what her deeper commitment was that I love this church. I love the people of this church. Okay, well, have that be what they're left with as opposed to this other piece, right? So the referee is very tricky and can easily be seen as the enemy, right? Or the opponent. There's also that piece in the game plan, right? So there's that. And then finally is the teammates, the team, those who help you to win. Who in your life helps you to win, right? The game you're out to play, the game you're out playing already, right? And then what are the results you're getting? So this is very sort of objective, right? You get to determine how far you want to go. You get to say what's showing up, what's now emerging, right? I don't know how much time we got, but I can go for.
Is this all in your book?
Yes.
Okay, so if someone wants to sign up for this thing, how will they contact you? If you, for example, they wanted to bring you in to do your work with their organization, whatever, what's the best way for people to contact you if they want to bring your work into their environment?
Yeah, they can reach me by, I'll give my website as well as my email. Email is probably best right now, but email is Joshua at thegameplan.biz. Thegameplan.biz. And the website is www.thegameplancoaching.com.
Okay.
Thegameplancoaching.com.
And which link would you like below the video? Because I'm gonna put a link below the video so they can click on it. Would you want to go to your website or you want to go directly to your email?
Email.
Email. Okay, so I'll put the email address below so that as they're watching the video, they'll have access to that and they can contact you that way.
Absolutely.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. Well, again, as we wind down, and I love the metaphor of game because when I think about, I'm a big NFL guy. I love football.
Mm-hmm.
And it is exactly the perfect metaphor for life. Because if you think about it, you've got 60,000 people or so in the stands. You've got maybe 100 or so on the field.
Mm-hmm.
The game.
That's right.
The ones who are on the field, you got to think about what it took for them to get to that point to be on the field. Mm-hmm. They're the ones that's playing the game. Most people aren't willing to put forth the effort to get on the field. They'd rather sit in the stands and watch people play. My job is to help people get on the field. Get out of the stand, get on the field, find out what you're passionate about, find out what your talents, your gifts and talents are, because you have them. You just have to cover them. Using that metaphor, I love how you use that metaphor with the different characters, the referees and the coach, because we can all relate to that. And again, metaphorically, it's easy to grasp. And it's really that simple. Do you want to be in the stands or do you want to be on the field? I say I want you on the field. And that's what Joshua and I are trying to do. We're trying to get you on the field. So we're providing you with some tools to help you play the game and not just watch it. So Joshua, I want to now give you an opportunity to share your closing thoughts. Any closing thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
You know, I mentioned earlier about my promise to the universe, right? Which is to help humanity win. And that's what I'm committed to. That's what I believe I've been built for. I'm almost just turned 57. And, you know, life ain't been no crystal stairs, as it were, but just knowing that life, there's also no top to this mountain called life, and that it's a long game, right? And I was at a middle school the other day, say, young person, you know, who you are today is not who you'll be in the future, right? So keep, you know, listening to the people. Hopefully you have someone, an adult, you know, in your corner who's a fan, who's a coach, even a referee, and on your team that will help lead and guide you to a bright future. So I look forward to, I work with educators in city schools in Baltimore and Delaware, New Orleans, and so forth, to get them to move from a punitive perspective to a restorative perspective about disciplining young people. I believe there are generations of families in Baltimore where students have been kicked out of the educational institution and wreaking hell on the streets, right? So if we can, look at their behaviors, give them consequences for their behaviors, and give them the opportunity to restore their own integrity, right, back into the school, I think that will go a long way. So I'm helping train educators to think that way with restorative practices. And so an extension of that is that they see the value of restorative practices in their own lives as well, right? So appreciate this opportunity, onward and upward.
Well, again, I don't believe in accidents. Everything happens for a reason. And, we were brought together by divine appointment. And it's been my absolute honor and privilege having you on the show. Keep doing what you're doing.
Yes, sir.
Because this is what it's going to take. It's going to take conversations like this, which gets at the root cause of most of the challenges we have to deal with, which is self. Right. And I love your saying, helping humanity win. I'm on board with you on that. And so that's our goal. Our job is to help humanity win. And with that being said, this has been another episode of Shatter the Stereotypes. And remember, you can create an extraordinary life, but you've got to be willing to put forth extraordinary effort. We'll see you next time. Take care.